Hello folks, my name is Mark and this is Mark's Movie Reviews. How you guys doing? So we looked at a giant snake movie last time, so this time we're going to watch a giant alligator movie, which is appropriately named Alligator and came out in 1980. And to sum it up, it's a hard-boiled cop tries to stop a giant alligator from eating people and fails miserably. This is one of those post-Jaws movies that came out. So after Jaws, there was a lot of films that were they were all about like nature run amok type films, you know, and they either had like sea monsters or other animals or something that go crazy and eat people. And this was one of those. But this one is actually kind of a step above the usual schlocky crap that's in this genre. It's got some pretty, decent acting and, a halfway decent plot, if not a bit generic plot, but it's still pretty well written, and it has some really good practical effects. So if this movie was made today, it'd probably be a Sci-Fi Channel fucking snorefest with really bad CG, but this was made in the early 80s and it actually has some pretty good parts to it, So the plot is pretty actually standard fare for these kinds of films. We start out in 1968 and a young girl gets a small baby alligator as a pet from the zoo, which she names Ramon, which I kind of find it crazy that you would give an alligator as a pet to a kid. I mean, parents today make a big deal about how pit bulls and Rottweilers and stuff are so dangerous, but back then kids were allowed to have fucking alligators. And it's actually true shit. My dad had an alligator as a child. It's how do you even think about that? It's hey, son, have a real lethal animal that can grow up and fucking eat you. Anyway, so the kid's dad flushes the alligator down the toilet for some reason. And then we fast forward to 1980. And the guy who plays Pam Grier's boyfriend and Jackie Brown, who is Robert Forster, is a cop who keeps pulling up all these random body parts up out of the sewers. And it turns out that some local arrogant scientist guy has been doing this research with growth hormones, and he's been injecting cute little puppies and then paying a local pet owner, who was played by the late great Cindy Lassick, to kidnap dogs from around the neighborhood, and then he would experiment on them and then dump them in the sewer when he's done with them. So, really bad stuff. So it turns out that Ramon has been living comfortably in the sewers these past 12 years, feasting on the growth hormone inside of this dog meat. And he's grown into this massive 35-foot long alligator, which in real life is not unheard of. Alligators and crocodiles actually can get that big, which is pretty crazy. Robert Forster quickly finds out that there's a giant alligator out there eating people when Ramon dispatches his new sidekick. And true to monster movie convention, at first no one believes him, but eventually he gets proof in the form of these pictures because Ramon eats this dirtbag reporter and he's taking pictures right when he's getting eaten, and then the hunt is on. It also conveniently turns out that the little girl in the beginning of the movie has grown up to become a leading herpetologist, which is a scientist that studies reptiles. Learn something every day, right? Anyway, and she and Robert Forster have to hook up, of course, at some point in the middle of the film, because this was the 80s and there had to be sex in every single film. So, that's fine. There's also some other bullshit about how his partner died in the past, and Robert Forster is getting fired for asking too many questions, and some stupid game hunter shows up, and he wants to hunt Ramon or whatever, but then he gets eaten in a big pile of garbage, blah, 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 blah. Eventually, Robert Forster and the hot reptile lady go on their own, and they blow up Ramon in the sewer with some stolen dynamite that they got from the evidence room, and everybody lives happily ever after. The movie shines in its practical effects. So Ramon is actually realized by a mixture of real alligator footage coupled with pretty convincing puppetry. They do a good job of making him look pretty large. A lot of movies like this will have a little tiny baby alligator walking around a model set and it looks all fake or whatever. But in this movie, it's apparently they spent a little bit of cash on this flick, because there are plenty of scenes of people getting stomped on by a giant alligator-sized foot and eaten by a giant alligator head, and which actually looks pretty good. Although most of this flick, actually, the gator is treated in a suspenseful Jaws kind of point of view shots and creeping up behind people and running away and such, but you do get to see a lot of the creature, especially towards the end. He does get a lot of decent screen time, and there's this one part where there's a wedding, and this wedding massacre, and the gator head is shown in quick cuts, and it gives this sort of crazed kind of pandemic feeling, and people are getting eaten left and right, and blood and gore flying all over the place, the wedding, and and you know, people get eaten and they get stepped on, and like cars blow up, and a guy gets his legs bit off and on a boat, and a dude randomly gets knocked into a wedding cake, and it's fucking awesome. You know, it looks really good for what they had. I mean, if this were made today, it'd be filled with like really cheap, unconvincing CGI, and it would look like crap, you know. But like, I don't know, the practical effects on screen actually make it look a lot better in some respects. Like, there's one part where the rich jerk-off guy who funded the experiments gets crushed in his limo, and you can see a few flaws, you know, like this rubber tail like smacking the hood of a fake car. But, you know, damn it, suspend your disbelief for a few seconds, just have fun with it. So the plot of the movie doesn't do much to break up monster movie convention. I mean, the hard-boiled cop no one believes and gets fired, but then he ends up saving the day, and the freakish experiments, and the corrupt politicians, and a leading lady who's way too young and too hot to actually be a scientist, but whatever. But overall, it's actually pretty good. It's a pretty satisfying experience, I must say. I mean, it sounds like I just described the plot of every single sci-fi movie ever made for TV in the last 10 years, right? But, you know, the difference is this movie is actually good. So if you want a good movie about a giant alligator eating people with lots of blood and gore and some pretty good practical effects, and this movie is the movie for you. Adios, folks.